Yes, please proceed, Mr. Garcia.
I'm sorry, am I here now? Hello.
We can hear you. Go right ahead. Introduce yourself and who's with you.
Okay, well, my name is Carlos Garcia. Um, my wife unfortunately had to work. He could not be here. My mother-in-law, Freya Fersland, is. She doesn't really have a statement, but she's more than willing to answer any questions should the board have it. With that
Great.
said,
Well,
I guess I'll begin.
Please proceed then, Mr. Garcia. You're recognized for 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Carlos. I'm an alcoholic. I committed the crime of felony credit card fraud and felony drinking and driving. I would first like to thank you for selecting my application for consideration. I am truly humbled with the opportunity to speak to the board. Since I'm only given 10 minutes, I plan to give a brief insight to my life growing up, a slice of my experiences, both good and bad, experiences that I've now come to live peace with. I grew up in North Minneapolis in one of the oldest Mexican families. My mother and father were divorced at about 8 years of age. Upon their divorce, my mom met a new boyfriend, and we moved to Plymouth. Much like a lot of the 80s stereotypical Mexican relationships, my mother was beaten off. This was a common in the house until I had enough, and I pulled a knife on him and ran away. I started running away often, and finally ended up at my father's. My father had health issues and could not take care of me. After spending the summer with him, the decision was made that I move in with my grandmother. This was the first time I had ever went to school for 4 consecutive years at the same place. Prior to this, I went to 12 different schools from kindergarten to 8th grade. The stability and respect was wonderful. It was something I needed. I wasn't a great student, but I loved school. I soon became a member of the wrestling team. I was varsity 3 years, captain. I barely graduated. I applied to the University of Minnesota. I never showed up. April 27th, 1991. My father was murdered. I was 19 years old. He was killed by a 14-year-old gang member who received 2 years in juvenile detention center. Every anniversary of his death, I contacted the Department of Probation. I know they can't tell me anything more than good or bad or how he's doing, but for a long time I had hoped he had changed his life. To see a child who's given a chance over punishment is something that I still struggle with today. I soon discovered drinking, and I quickly erased all goals, respect, and trust. For the next 20 years, I created victims, I disobeyed laws, and I put my terrible drinking thinking first and foremost. I remember Judge Somerville stating, "If I see you again, you will go to prison." At no point did I believe this. My thought was, I own a house, a car, I pay taxes. I got one more workhouse sentence before prison. That was honestly my sick thinking. Please understand, I don't want to minimize the impact and creation of victims. I only have 10 minutes, and I'm sure there'll be questions about my crimes. Please keep an open mind. Thank you. Upon release from prison, I started from the very bottom. I was not too humble to do anything in my life. I went to 180 degrees halfway house. I applied for a dishwashing job, and I met David Cook. I was hired as a food runner at Seven Steakhouse. Upon completion of the halfway house, I was immediately made a server. Shortly thereafter, the head chef asked me to become a manager at a restaurant called Bellicera. I used to be in the restaurant business in San Antonio as a waiter for quite some years. Thus, I excelled as a manager at Bellicera. Unfortunately, we closed due to the economic collapse. I met with some friends and we decided to start a food truck. I was the second food truck in downtown Minneapolis after the food truck ban was lifted. I did that for 2 to 3 years and moved on to shipping containers and freight management of DDG, which is dried distilled grains. We sent it overseas. I then became a manager of a University of Minnesota bar and restaurant. Being a felon is kind of a heavy task and throws wrenches in the life of people who did not commit the crime and do not need to share it. But my wife, Melissa, accepts me as I am. It makes me want to be a better person. A few years later, we were married and I officially became a stepdad. I did the best I could, and I give them the best of me. I decided to start my own business. My biggest accomplishment next to raising my kids was passing an FBI background check and being approved for a small business association loan to build one of my dreams. Then COVID happens. Sales drop. I adjust working, basically open to close. During this time, my landlord stole $26,000 from my account and started to try to force me out during COVID. The Floyd riots happened, and the landlord uses this to board up my building, and now I'm out. I soon have COVID, and I'm in a battle for my life. We lost our home. This series of life struggles never challenged my sobriety. I've learned how to cope with life-changing challenges without alcohol. I can give you no more greater proof than my 2020 life experience. Through the support of my family, also includes my core group of friends. I'm still a strong Mexican person striving to be even better. I'm humbled that 2 judges and 2 county attorneys approved my petition for pardon. This honestly left me speechless. I committed crimes, and that's a duty to live with. I have to live with them. I understand that. September 9th, 2020, I was let out of the hospital. I'm now classified as a COVID long hauler. I suffer from respiratory issues, joint and body pain, brain fog, double vision, extreme fatigue, and COVID insomnia. Some of these symptoms have improved, and I've created workarounds to figure out my life. Long haulers have no support. We must use creativity and determination to live. We feel forgotten. The biggest problem I face is fatigue. There's only a few jobs I could do and cannot due to my felony. I've lost a lot of opportunities due to my felony. I'm fully aware of the poor choices that I put there. What I'm asking to is to be the 3rd DWI pardon since 1992. I believe I'm a candidate to consider. I'm not perfect. I'm simply a man in progress asking to help his wife provide. This pardon would be life-changing and, to be honest, life-saving. Working while I continue my recovery of life and health is truly what I'm asking for. I have accomplished, I have failed, and I will accomplish again. I thank you for your time, your service to this country, and to the state of Minnesota. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Attorney General Ellison, questions of Mr. Garcia?
No, Governor, I don't have any questions for Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia, I will say to Mr. Garcia, congratulations on the self-improvements you have made, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, how long have you maintained your sobriety?
I'm on 15 years going on 16.
You mentioned a little bit about this. How do you credit that over what was obviously one of the most stressful and traumatic years of your life over the last 15 months? How were you able to maintain that sobriety?
To be honest, it was my wife, my children, and my friends. I kept in contact as things were going down, were happening, as my life was collapsing. I spoke of the problems. I wasn't afraid to share. I think a lot of times in a Mexican machismo way, we're afraid to speak of our feelings, our insecurities of being scared. And by doing that and being open to suggestions, it's something that I implemented. One of my friends who passed away due to COVID said to me, write emails to law firms and see if there's anybody pro bono that will help your business fight the landlord. And by the grace of God, it was given. So I guess I really used my support group, and it honestly worked. And I can never say anything more than that.
Great. Thank you. Chief Justice.
Mr. Garcia, I just wanted to ask you about, it looks like, so on your pardon application, we ask you to tell us about all your prior criminal convictions.
Yeah.
And it looks like there maybe were a few that you didn't list, and I wanted to ask you about that. There was a false information to the police conviction in 1996, driving after withdrawal in 2003, and then careless driving in 2011. Can you speak about those and just tell us what happened and maybe explain why you didn't put that information on your application?
Absolutely. First, I'm going to say this is not an excuse, simply an explanation. When I found out about the possibility of pardon extraordinaire, I was in a time crunch. I had no legal representation. I did this on my own. So the effects that I was going through, such as brain fog, double vision, this was a struggle, and I truly tried to place everything in there as I was going back and forth on the paperwork that I got from the BCA in St. Paul. It was not intentional. I guess I'll start with the careless driving. I thought it was reckless driving, but careless driving. What had happened was that I was attempting to get an individual's license plate number. I called 911, and the person went through the red light. I didn't get the full number. I looked both ways. I went through the light. I then got an attorney because I was on 5-year conditional release. And I was concerned that if I pled guilty, I would be going to Rush City. Upon finding out that it was not, I pled guilty. I ran a red light. There's no way around it. That's, careless, reckless driving. And that's what happened. The falsifying identification, I'm not going to lie, that was years ago. I'm going to assume I was probably drunk when I was driving, or I was driving illegally, and I gave a cousin's name. I was probably my cousin Ramon, now that I think about it. And that's what I did. I don't remember what you said the second one or third one was.
There's a driving after withdrawal from 2003.
And again, 20 years, I didn't have a license. I was drinking. I was driving. I was making victims. I'm not a victim myself. I'm a victimizer. And I'm fully aware of that. I endangered lives, and that's what I did for 20 years. And I'm not the same person, and I know.
All right, I appreciate your candor, Mr. Garcia. I'll be supporting your pardon today.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcia, this is just for you to help me on this. This process is for us to try and learn. How do we stop people from doing that? I think the Chief Justice is right. You're just candor, and you just said it. You just drive, and we tell you we have all these ad campaigns. We tell people to call a cab and all that. Do you need to get arrested? Is that what it takes? I mean, seriously, is that the way that, and then the help of understanding that, the disease of alcoholism needs that treatment?
I think that every person is different. Until you truly are done, you'll keep using. I have friends all the time that call me in a moment of crisis and continue drinking. I can only speak for me, and I've thought about this for years. It's probably not a popular thing to say, but I truly believe that the state of Minnesota, or Hennepin County at the time, slapped me so hard that I would have took it seriously. And I think laws have changed since I started drinking and driving. To put things in perspective, and I have to look it over, I probably did 4 days in jail until I got my 4th felony DWI. So in my drunk thinking, there was no way I was going to take it serious. And that's why I say I believed I had a workhouse stay. Upon my felony, I finally got work release in the workhouse. I should have been held accountable.
I appreciate that candor. I think that's we're all trying to understand how this works. One last thing I would say, you talk about friends calling you. I would just mention you have a calm demeanor, Mr. Garcia, especially talking about these very difficult issues. Any thought of doing that a little more with others who are in this boat? I mean, you've walked this path.
I've always tried to share my story. I've met people famous that have changed their lives. This isn't a name drop by anything. But when I ran a bar and restaurant, I invited a gentleman by the name of Rick Ross to come tell his story. And from then on, I've actually taken it seriously, and I've tried to reach out. My only issue is that right now, my health, above and beyond else, I need to recover that. And, for example, these screens are making my eyes tired, and I'm going to be extremely tired after this. But that's my number one concern. And once I can get through that, I actually plan on speaking to Norman.
Well, I appreciate that. Again, this is not a court of law, and these are sometimes very unorthodox questions, but us just trying to ways that we can improve lives. And I just, for me, it feels like you may have that capacity to touch folks in a way that makes that difference. So, any further questions from the board? Hearing none, I'd now call for a roll call vote of each members. Chief Justice Gilday, how do you vote?
I vote yes. I favor the pardon.
Attorney General Ellison, how do you vote on the pardon?
I vote aye, Governor.
And I, Governor Walz, vote in favor of granting this pardon. Mr. Garcia, your pardon is granted. Thank you, and I wish you all the best.
I bless you. Thank you. Thank you, Keith. It's good to see you.
The next applicant is Mr. Timothy Flaherty. Mr. Flaherty, please introduce yourself and any individuals here in support of your pardon today.